This program and its contents are designed for information and educational purposes only. This program does not render medical advice or professional services and is not intended to be a substitute for professional care. The information provided here should not be used for the purposes of diagnosing or treating a medical or psychiatric condition. If you have or suspect you may have a health problem, consult your healthcare provider.
This program is brought to you by Movement Solutions and Soaring Wings Vineyard and Brewing. I'm Diane Silva, and today my guest is Captain Jim Shaw of Soaring Wings Winery and Brewery. But I have to be at the window.
Right. Yeah.
If I'm in the back of the plane and looking at a bunch of heads, it's just a bunch of bobbleheads, and especially when we have turbulence, which is one thing I'd like to kind of address.
Yeah.
A lot of people are afraid of turbulence, and for understandable, I call them ground turbulence, because like you hit a bump. But if you hit a speed bump at 2 miles an hour, it's going to be different than if you hit a speed bump at 500 miles an hour. I'm going to let you.
Well, turbulence is it's a way of life in the air, and there's almost always some turbulence. Right now during the spring, the air is unstable, so you got vertical shafts of air going up and down, and that's what causes a lot of our turbulence, or along the jet stream. Regardless, this time of year, we get a fair amount of bumps. And it's always a really good idea when you're in your seat to have your seatbelt fastened, because sometimes you can hit some unexpected bumps. And you'll hear the PAs sometimes to that effect advising you to do that. But the airplanes can handle it. They're meant to go through these things of air. They're not hitting anything solid. It kind of feels like it in the airplane. Right. But in essence, they're hitting air that's turbulent, and it's just kind of accelerating the aircraft up and down a little bit. There's probably been an accident caused by turbulence, but I just can't put one in other than people getting hurt that are not buckled in their seats and are up walking around when they shouldn't be. Very, very rarely are people hurt when you just go, it's clear, what we call clear air turbulence, and you just hit something that nobody expects. That's fairly rare. Right. That's still why you should have your seatbelt fastened when you're in that seat, though.
Which brings me to my next question. I've got a question from is it truly safe for children under 2 to sit on your lap? And how would should they be in car seats or sitting on the lap, or
well,
thoughts?
statistically, the reason why the FAA allowed that to begin in the first place, because it's much safer to be on an airplane than it is to be in a car.
Okay.
And so they look at the statistics and they said, oh, it's 1,000 times safer for a child to be on that mother or father's lap, even though they're not buckled down. If you hit severe turbulence, it could cause injury to the child, because driving in a car is much riskier.
Okay.
So they kind of fudged it a lot. Obviously, the most safe thing to do is to have a car seat and a separate seat for the child. And they now have these seats that are, they're amazing nowadays. Right. Oh yeah, it's made to buckle into an airplane. It's made to turn into a hand carrier. Matter of fact, put a couple wings on a propeller, probably fly. So they're pretty cool the way they make these things now. They're very versatile. It's like my wife and I were talking about, wow, I wish we had those when we had little ones. Right.
I've seen some of them that actually look like a carry-on kind of thing. The kid's in the seat, and you're just rolling. The kid's still strapped, and you're rolling it along, and no, not the kid is not in it, but the thing. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting.
Let me address one thing you talked about earlier, not to throw you off here.
No,
but,
you're fine.
2 things. My wife flies a lot.
Okay.
She goes on trips with me.
Okay.
And as I was telling you earlier, she does a prayer and an Our Father and sign of the cross as we're rolling down the runway.
Okay.
We're what we call non-revving, sitting in the back. And I always chuckle at her, but that's her way of coping with the stress of not being in control.
Right.
Which a lot of people feel like. You don't feel like you're in control back there. And it's part of where some of the anxiety comes from. She flew next to a lady who had extreme anxiety about flying, and the lady said, please talk to me the whole time. And so my wife loves to talk. And so they talked, and she kept her off of the focusing on the anxiety and focusing on her conversation. And therefore, that's a good coping mechanism also. As you said, you sit by this seat and you're looking, you're talking, you're doing things. Stay focused on something else. Right. Instead of, what was that? What was that noise? Stuff like that.
Right, and that will bring me, yes, find something that you can divert your attention to. I'm not saying, you know, I mean, if there's an emergency, they'll let you know, you guys will let us know what to do.
Absolutely.
You know, but find something, you know, I can't necessarily read when I'm anxious, but I can find, oh, let's see if we can do this. I mean, I love the takeoffs. You would think that that's the worst. No, I don't like the cruising. Because, you know, it's like, oh God, would we ever get there? What if, you know, just there's nothing really happening? You know, you talked about that boredom stuff. But so, and I love the landings. Oh, we're almost there. You know, where some people are, no, I'll take the cruising all day long, but still finding, oh, wonder what speed we are. Oh, flare, flare, flare. You know, I mean, some of the stuff that I know how to do. But, all right. So would you kind of go back to turbulence just real quick? And I know my brain's kind of all over the place. You've been watching, you know what happens. Okay, what causes turbulence? I mean,
it's basically airflows rubbing up against each other.
Okay.
If you've ever swirled your hand through some water and see the little swirls that occur, well, that's turbulence.
Okay.
Okay, when a river goes down or a stream flows and you see swirls and eddies, that's turbulence. Okay. Air is sort of like liquid. I mean, when it flows, it creates turbulent airflows too. When the air's flowing over the ground, just like when the water's going by a shore, and you see those little eddies, you get those eddies close to the ground or over mountains. Okay. We call that mountain wave because you can actually get pretty large eddies off of mountains with pretty strong winds. So it's basically that turbulence just like you see in water. It's very similar. And when you're flying through the air, if you had an extremely stable, let's say a glassy pond, and you've got something going through it, it's not going to have any turbulence. And we have that in our air sometimes too, where it's just glassy smooth. But when you're going up or down a stream, you get close to the shore, let's say you're on a canoe, you move slower because the water's not moving as fast as it is in the middle of the stream. Okay, gotcha. As you transition in the middle stream, as you head out, your nose is actually going to turn with the stream because there's difference in velocity. Okay. All right, so that little turn gets really exaggerated when you're at 500 miles an hour. Okay, gotcha. Okay, so you're hitting it a little bit faster, so you're feeling it like this, or up and down, or sideways a little bit. So those velocities you go through are a lot faster, and you just feel them more. Make sense? Yeah, I understand it. Yes, I do, and yes, it does. Now, can you kind of address just for a brief minute the kind of steps that you would have to take, you have taken to get from a private pilot or someone who doesn't even fly to an air transport pilot, as it's known in general aviation, or airline pilot? Well, it's a pretty long journey for most of us. For me, I started off as a private pilot. I was out at Millard Airport, learned to fly in a Cherokee 140, got my license, flew around for a while, and said, this was very expensive. This is back in 1977. And so I looked into the military, and I got a pilot slot through the Air Force. I did ROTC. I was already mostly through college, so it took me a while. I did graduate school for a year until I got my commission as a second lieutenant in the Air Force. Went to pilot training at Williams Air Force Base down near Phoenix, and then was an instructor pilot in the Air Force, and then flew EC-135s, so the old looking glass they used to have out at Air Force Base. And then I got hired by the airlines. As you're doing all this, you're learning, you're gaining hours, you're gaining experience. The airlines like to hire, of course, the most experienced pilots they can. They also want to hire the people that they believe are the best for their company. Okay. So some hire slightly different people than others. They have different personalities. Okay. Companies, you know. Google has a slightly different personality than Union Pacific, I would say.
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah, it's the same thing in the airline business a little bit. And as you go through your airline career, I started off as a flight engineer, and I gradually became a first officer, co-pilot, a lot of people call him. I did that for a lot of years, and after I've been flying with my airline for 15 years, I upgraded to a 737 captain. And several years ago, I started flying as a 767 captain, which is what I'm still currently doing.
Cool. So each, and I'm kind of, okay, I don't understand the differences between a 737, 777, 767. Approximately, you know, like one's, I can look at the airplanes and say, okay, that's this airline, that's this airline, that's this airline. Some of them are longer and sleeker, some of them are wider and shorter. What's, if you could briefly, the different equipment, you know, like a 767, is it a wide?
This is what we call a wide body.
Okay.
Because it's got 2 aisles going down in the back. And it's the 747, everybody's pretty familiar with that. It's a pretty big airplane. Okay. 777s are pretty big airplanes. Then you got what we call the narrow bodies, which would be a 757, 727, 737s, MD-88s, now the Boeing 717s or the Airbus 321s or 320s. Okay. Those are just smaller airplanes, and those are used to service the smaller markets than the larger airplanes.
Regional jets, so to speak.
And all the way down to the regional jets, yeah.
I know there's a website online for those of us who, you know, there's a different ride in different parts of the airplane. You know, I hear over the wings is one of the more smoother rides, you know, and it depends on the weather and, you know, everything, the season. But for those of us who like to have our information, so before you book your flights or as you're booking your flights, there is websites out there that can tell you, you know, what seats, you know, and it gives you a description of, you know, kind of the ride with the seat. What the equipment is, you know, when you're booking, look at what's their equipment. Now go do the research on the equipment. Because this way you'll know what the ride is like, where the best place to sit is, especially for those of us who are anxious. You know, some people who are anxious like the middle seat. They don't want anything to do with looking outside because they don't want to see how high up we are. You know, which reminds me, real quick question, and we're getting ready to run out of time here. Basically, how far, you know, when we're cruising, how far can you see? You know, I mean, you know, and make out.
On a clear day, a couple 100 miles.
Okay,
yeah,
that's what I was
maybe even longer than that.
Wow, from 5-6 miles. What is it? 5 miles up is usually where we are. We're just under the stratosphere.
Actually, anywhere from 5 to 7.
So, do we ever hit the stratosphere?
Well, we don't. In the military, they can.
Okay, right.
But the troposphere goes, it can vary, you know. Okay. The stratosphere is quite a bit above that. So, okay. You know, I'm not normally up there too much, but near the bottom of it, kind of.
Cool. So 200 or so miles, this is great. If you wouldn't mind, I would love to have you come back in another segment, and we're going to wrap this one up because we're out of time.
Okay.
This program is brought to you by Movement Solutions and Soaring Wings Vineyard and Brewing.